She thought they had the perfect love story. Just weeks before their wedding, Imogen found out her fiancé Dominic was living a cruel lie. Behind her back, he was secretly engaged to Eliza, her childhood rival. The man she trusted had been stealing her family's money for his company while planning to dump her after getting the final investment. When she confronted him, he laughed in her face. "I never loved you," he sneered. "You were just a bank account." That night, fate gave her a second chance. Reborn 5 years earlier, Imogen had all her memories intact. This time she wouldn't be his victim. This time she had a plan that would leave him with nothing but regret when he discovered who really owned his precious company. Imogen Blackwood checked her reflection in the full-length mirror, admiring how the white silk wedding gown hugged her curves. In just 2 weeks, she would become Mrs. Dominic Valenti. 8 months ago, she would never have imagined that she would fall so deeply in love with the charismatic tech entrepreneur who had swept her off her feet at a charity gala. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," her mother said, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. "I just wish you had given yourself more time to get to know him before rushing into marriage." Imogen smiled patiently. Her family had expressed concerns about the whirlwind romance from the beginning. But she was 29, not some naive teenager. She knew what she wanted, and Dominic was everything she had ever dreamed of. Brilliant, ambitious, charming, and he looked at her like she was the only woman in the world. "Mom, when you know, Imogen said, smoothing down the fabric of her gown. "Dominic is the one. I have never been more certain of anything." Her mother nodded, but Imogen could see the worry in her eyes. The worry that had been there since she had announced her engagement just 4 months into their relationship. The worry that had intensified when Dominic had asked for her family's investment in his startup company. But Imogen had believed in him completely. She had convinced her family to invest a significant portion of their modest fortune in his vision. Later that evening, as Imogen was reviewing the final details for their honeymoon in Bali, her phone pinged with a notification. The joint account she shared with Dominic had registered a large withdrawal. She frowned, opening the banking app to check the transaction details. $500,000 had been transferred to an account she didn't recognize. Surely there was an explanation. Dominic had mentioned needing additional capital for the business. But why hadn't he discussed such a large withdrawal with her? She tried calling him, but the call went straight to voicemail. "Dominic, honey, I noticed a large withdrawal from our account. Give me a call when you get this." She set her phone down and tried to focus on the honeymoon planning, but her mind kept drifting back to the money. Almost unconsciously, she picked up Dominic's tablet that he had left behind that morning. They knew each other's passcodes, there was nothing to hide between them. She opened his emails, telling herself she was just looking for business correspondence that might explain the transfer. What she found instead were dozens of messages from someone saved as E, with subject lines like "missing you" and "our future." Her heart raced as she clicked on the most recent one. "Dominic, I can't stand the thought of you marrying her. Have you told her about us yet? About our plans? I need to know that you're still mine." Imogen's hands trembled as she set the tablet down. This had to be some kind of mistake. Dominic loved her. He wouldn't betray her like this. Over the next few days, Imogen became a detective in her own relationship. She found more suspicious transactions, more messages from E. She even discovered a second phone hidden in Dominic's desk drawer. But she needed proof, something concrete that would either confirm her worst fears or put her mind at ease. With a heavy heart, she hired a private investigator, a discreet woman named Rachel who specialized in infidelity cases. "I just need to know the truth," Imogen told her, "even if it breaks my heart." 3 days later, Rachel delivered a manila envelope to Imogen's apartment. Inside were dozens of photographs of Dominic with a tall, elegant woman with auburn hair. Imogen recognized her immediately. Eliza Chamberlain, her former childhood rival who had made her school years a living hell. In the photos, Dominic and Eliza were clearly intimate, holding hands, kissing in a secluded restaurant, entering a jewelry store together, and most damning of all, Eliza wearing what appeared to be an engagement ring. Imogen felt sick. She had been living a lie. The man she thought was her soulmate had been leading a double life. But why? What did he gain from this elaborate deception? The answer came in the form of financial records Rachel had uncovered. Dominic had been systematically funneling the investments from Imogen's family into personal accounts. He was using her family's money to fund his business while planning a life with Eliza. Rage and heartbreak warred within her as she drove to Dominic's downtown office. She found him alone, working late as usual, or so she had thought. Now she wondered if his late nights had been spent with Eliza. "We need to talk," Imogen said, her voice trembling with emotion. Dominic looked up, his expression shifting from surprise to caution. "What's wrong, babe?" Without a word, she dropped the envelope of photos on his desk. His face paled as he flipped through them, then hardened into a mask she had never seen before. "I know everything, Dominic. About you and Eliza. About what you've been doing with my family's money." He stared at her for a long moment, then laughed, a cold, cruel sound that sent shivers down her spine. "And what exactly are you going to do about it?" he asked, leaning back in his chair. "I'm going to tell everyone. My family, your investors, the police. No one will believe you," he said with chilling confidence. "Your family already thinks you're impulsive for rushing into this engagement. They'll just think you've had a breakdown." "Why?" Imogen whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Why would you do this to me? I loved you." Dominic's handsome face twisted into a sneer. "I never loved you, Imogen. You were just a bank account with legs. Eliza and I have been together for years. We needed capital for the business, and your family was the perfect target. The plan was to marry you, secure the final investment, then divorce you a year later. Clean, simple, profitable." Imogen staggered back as if he had physically struck her. The casual cruelty in his voice, the complete lack of remorse, it was more than she could bear. "You will never get away with this," she said, backing toward the door. "I already have," Dominic replied with a shrug. "Good luck proving anything." Imogen fled the office, tears blinding her as she raced to her car. Rain had begun to fall, matching her mood as she sped through the city streets. How could she have been so blind? So trusting, her entire future had been built on lies. Lightning flashed, momentarily blinding her. She swerved, trying to regain control of the car on the wet pavement. The last thing she saw was the approaching headlights of a truck as her car spun across the median. Then darkness. Imogen gasped awake, her heart pounding. The familiar surroundings of her old apartment came into focus, not the twisted metal of a car crash. She sat up, disoriented, and grabbed her phone. The date on the screen made her breath catch. May 15, 2020. 5 years in the past. She stumbled to the bathroom, staring at her reflection in shock. Her face was younger, her hair shorter and the bob cut she had worn before meeting Dominic. Was this some kind of bizarre dream? A hallucination in her final moments? Over the next few days, Imogen moved through her life in a daze. Her job at the investment firm was exactly as she remembered it. Her friends treated her normally, with no knowledge of Dominic Valenti or her engagement or her death. She had somehow been given a second chance, 5 years before she ever met the man who would destroy her. At first, she tried to convince herself it had all been a nightmare, a strange premonition. But the details were too vivid, too specific. She remembered every moment of her relationship with Dominic, every conversation, every kiss. She remembered Eliza's face in those photographs, the cold sneer on Dominic's face when he admitted his deception. And she remembered the headlights coming toward her in that final moment. 1 week after her awakening, Imogen sat in her apartment surrounded by research. She had looked up Dominic Valenti. He existed. His startup was in its infancy, exactly as he had described during their early dates. Eliza Chamberlain existed too, working at a rival investment firm across town. It was real, she whispered to herself. All of it was real or will be real. And I can change it. Grief hit her like a physical blow. She mourned the relationship she had thought was true, the future she had planned, the woman she had been, naive and trusting. For 3 days she allowed herself to feel everything, to scream and cry and rage. Then on the 4th day she dried her tears and began to plan. Never again, she vowed to herself. I will not be a victim this time. Imogen threw herself into her work with new determination. With her knowledge of future market trends, she made strategic investments that quickly caught the attention of her superiors. She had always been talented with numbers, but now she seemed prescient, able to predict shifts in the market with uncanny accuracy. Within 8 months, she had been promoted twice. By the end of her first year back, she had amassed enough personal capital to leave the firm and establish herself as an independent angel investor. Are you sure about this? Her former boss asked when she handed in her resignation. You have a bright future here, Imogen. "I need to forge my own path," she replied with a confidence she had never possessed in her previous life. "But I hope we can continue to work together." She focused her investments on women-founded tech startups, building a reputation for having both sharp business acumen and a genuine interest in mentoring female entrepreneurs. Her portfolio grew steadily, and with it, her network of powerful connections in the tech industry. At night, she researched Domenic Valenti. She tracked his company's growth, which matched what she remembered him telling her. She monitored his social media, watching as he cultivated the same charming, ambitious persona that had once won her heart. But now she could see the calculation behind it, the careful curation of his image. More disturbing were her discoveries about his past. Using her new connections and resources, she uncovered a pattern. Before her, there had been 3 other wealthy women who had invested in Domenic's ventures only to find themselves mysteriously cut out when the businesses became successful. None had gone to the authorities, likely too embarrassed to admit they had been so thoroughly deceived. "I know your playbook now, Domenic," Imogen said to his image on her computer screen. "This time I will be ready for you." She trained herself physically as well as mentally, taking self-defense classes and running daily to build her strength and endurance. She worked with a therapist, careful not to reveal her rebirth but focusing on building her self-worth and establishing healthy boundaries. She even changed her appearance, growing out her bob into long, glossy waves and updating her wardrobe to project the confidence and success she now embodied. 2 years after her rebirth, Imogen bought a sleek penthouse apartment with views of the city skyline. As she stood on her balcony, sipping champagne and watching the sunset, she reflected on how different her life was this time around. In her previous life, she had been successful but cautious, always putting others' needs before her own. Now she was wealthy, respected, and completely independent, and she was ready for what came next. According to her memories, she would meet Domenic at the annual Tech Innovation Conference in just under 3 years. By then, his company would be established enough to seek significant outside investment, the kind that her family had provided in her previous life, the kind that he had used to set up his future with Eliza. "Not this time," Imogen murmured, raising her glass to the skyline. "This time I will be the one writing the ending to our story." She created a series of shell companies with discrete ownership structures that would allow her to invest without revealing her identity. She cultivated relationships with key players in the tech industry who would eventually become Domenic's partners and employees. She even began a careful study of Eliza Chamberlain, understanding that the woman was as much a schemer as Domenic himself. As the months passed, Imogen's plan took shape. She would allow Domenic to think he was manipulating her, while in fact, she would be the one pulling the strings. She would pretend to fall for his charm while remaining emotionally detached. And when the time came when he believed his victory was assured, she would reveal the truth and watch his carefully constructed world crumble around him. The thought should have filled her with satisfaction. Instead, she felt a strange emptiness. Would revenge truly heal the wounds of his betrayal? Or was she allowing him to shape her life once again, just in a different way? "It is not just about revenge," she told herself firmly. "It is about justice, for me and for all the other women he has used and discarded." 3 years into her new life, Imogen received the email she had been waiting for. The Tech Innovation Conference was announcing its speakers and participants for the upcoming event. And there, among the list of promising entrepreneurs seeking investment, was Domenic Valenti. "Game on," Imogen whispered, closing her laptop with a decisive click. The time had come to set her plan in motion. Imogen stepped into the grand ballroom of the Westfield Hotel, where the Tech Innovation Conference was being held. The space buzzed with energy as entrepreneurs, investors, and industry leaders networked over champagne and canapés. Her eyes scanned the room with practiced ease until they landed on him. Domenic Valenti stood near the bar, laughing with a small group of admirers. He looked exactly as she remembered from their first meeting, tall and striking in a tailored navy suit, his dark hair artfully tousled. The sight of him sent an unexpected jolt through her system, a mixture of anger and something else she refused to acknowledge. She had prepared for this moment for 3 years, yet now that it was here, she felt a flicker of doubt. Could she really go through with this elaborate charade? Could she look into those eyes that had once deceived her so completely and pretend she knew nothing of his true nature? "Focus," she whispered to herself, smoothing down her emerald green dress. "Remember why you are here." She positioned herself near the bar, pretending to check her phone while waiting for the bartender. As anticipated, Dominic approached to order another drink. Imogen deliberately turned, bumping into him and spilling a drop of her champagne on his sleeve. "I am so sorry," she exclaimed, grabbing a napkin from the bar. "Let me help you with that." Dominic looked up, irritation flashing across his face before morphing into interest as he took in her appearance. "No harm done," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "Some things are worth getting a little wet for." Imogen fought the urge to roll her eyes at the line. Instead, she laughed lightly, extending her hand. "Imogen Blackwood, and you are?" "Dominic Valenti," he replied, holding her hand a moment longer than necessary. "I do not believe we have met before. I would remember someone like you." Just like before, she thought. The same words, the same charming smile. Only this time she could see the calculation behind it, the way his eyes assessed her worth even as he flirted. "I am one of the angel investors attending the conference," she said, deliberately mentioning her role. "I specialize in tech startups with strong female leadership." His expression shifted ever so slightly. She could almost see him recalibrating his approach. "Fascinating," he said. "I would love to hear more about your investment philosophy. Perhaps over dinner tonight?" In her previous life, she had declined his first invitation, making him work a little harder. It had been part of what made her seem like a challenge worth pursuing. This time she smiled and said, "That sounds lovely. I happen to be free this evening." Dominic blinked, momentarily thrown by her easy acceptance. "Excellent. Shall we say 8 o'clock? I know a small Italian place nearby that has the most incredible risotto." "It is a date," Imogen replied, noting with satisfaction how he reacted to her confidence. She was not the same woman he had manipulated before. This time she was leading the dance. That evening, as they sat in the intimate restaurant, Imogen experienced the strangest sense of déjà vu. The restaurant was the same one he had taken her to on their first date in her previous life. The same soft lighting, the same violin music playing in the background. He even ordered the same wine. "So tell me about your company," Imogen said, leaning forward with apparent interest. "I read your profile in the conference booklet, but I would love to hear it from you." Dominic launched into his pitch, just as passionate and persuasive as she remembered. His company, Valenti Tech, developed innovative payment processing systems for small businesses. His vision was to revolutionize how independent retailers competed with large corporations. "The problem," he said, "is that we need significant capital to scale. The right investor could help us dominate the market within 18 months. And what would the right investor get in return?" Imogen asked, sipping her wine. "A guaranteed 20% return within 2 years," he replied without hesitation, "plus the satisfaction of helping level the playing field for small businesses." A memory flashed through her mind. Dominic in his office, sneering as he admitted using her family's money to build his business while planning to leave her. The recollections strengthened her resolve. "That sounds promising," she said, keeping her tone neutral. "I would need to see your business plan and financial projections, of course." "Of course," he agreed eagerly. "I can have those sent to you tomorrow." As the evening progressed, Dominic grew increasingly attentive, using all the same tactics that had worked on her before. He asked thoughtful questions about her work, laughed at her jokes, and found excuses to touch her hand across the table. By the time dessert arrived, a casual observer would have thought they were already intimate. Imogen played her role perfectly, seeming to warm to him gradually while maintaining just enough professional distance to keep him interested. Inside, however, she felt a growing unease. Despite knowing exactly who and what he was, she found herself responding to his charm. Her body remembered the attraction, even as her mind rebelled against it. "This has been wonderful," she said as they left the restaurant, "but I should be getting back to my hotel. Early meeting tomorrow." "Let me drive you," Dominic offered, stepping closer. "That is not necessary," Imogen replied, firmly but politely. "I prefer to take a cab." He looked momentarily frustrated, then smiled. "At least let me get your number. I would love to continue our conversation." She gave him her business card, watching as he programmed her number into his phone. "I look forward to seeing those projections," she said, stepping into the cab that the doorman had hailed for her. As the cab pulled away, she let out a long breath. The first encounter had gone exactly as planned. Dominic was interested, both professionally and personally. Now she needed to maintain the delicate balance of seeming to fall for him while keeping her real agenda hidden. Over the next few weeks, Imogen carefully cultivated her relationship with Dominic. Business meetings turned into dinners, which evolved into weekend outings. She allowed the relationship to progress at exactly the pace it had before, knowing precisely when to yield and when to hold back to keep him pursuing her. Meanwhile, she continued her investigation into his past. She arranged meetings with two of his previous victims, presenting herself as a potential business partner who was doing due diligence. "I cannot prove anything," the first woman told her, a former venture capitalist named Miranda. "But I lost nearly $1 million in his first company. Somehow, just before it became profitable, my stake was diluted to almost nothing. The paperwork was impeccable, completely legal. But I know I was played." The second woman, Janine, had a similar story. "He was so charming," she said bitterly. "By the time I realized what was happening, he had already moved on, both personally and professionally. The pattern was clear. Dominic targeted financially savvy women, used their expertise and connections to build his businesses, then cut them out when they were no longer useful. And now he was trying to do the same to her. Again, most concerning was when she finally managed to arrange a meeting with Eliza Chamberlain, ostensibly to discuss potential collaboration between their firms. Eliza was exactly as Imogen remembered from the photographs, elegant and sharp-eyed, with a coolness that bordered on arrogance. "I hear you have been spending time with Dominic Valenti," Eliza said casually over coffee. "He is quite the entrepreneur, is not he? You know him?" Imogen asked, feigning surprise. "Oh, we go way back," Eliza replied with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "He is very good at getting what he wants." The implication was clear. Eliza was already in Dominic's orbit, just as before. The wheels of their scheme were already in motion, but this time Imogen was 2 steps ahead. As her relationship with Dominic deepened, Imogen set the next phase of her plan in motion. Through her network of financial experts, she established 3 shell companies, each with a complex ownership structure that could not be traced back to her. Meridian Ventures, Blackstone Capital, and Azure Investments appeared to be independent entities run by different investment managers, but all answered to Imogen. "The paperwork is completely legitimate," her attorney assured her as she signed the final documents. "These companies can invest in Valenti Tech without anyone being able to connect them to you." "Perfect," Imogen replied, surveying the complex organizational charts spread across her desk. "Let us begin with a modest investment from each company. Nothing large enough to attract attention, but sufficient to get a foot in the door." Within a month, all 3 shell companies had made investments in Valenti Tech. Dominic was thrilled with the new influx of capital, never suspecting that the same person controlled all 3 funding sources. Imogen watched with cold satisfaction as he eagerly accepted money from the very woman he planned to betray. While her financial web tightened around Valenti Tech, Imogen focused on building relationships with Dominic's business partners and key employees. She hosted dinner parties where she invited tech industry leaders, always ensuring that Dominic's team members were included. She offered advice on investment strategies to his chief financial officer, Emily Chen, quickly becoming someone Emily trusted and admired. "You have a real gift for this," Emily told her one evening after Imogen had helped her restructure a problematic investment portfolio. "Dominic is lucky to have found you." Imogen smiled, ignoring the twinge of guilt she felt at using Emily to gain inside information. "I am just happy to help. Valenti Tech has such potential, and I believe in supporting talented people." Through these connections, Imogen gained unprecedented access to the inner workings of Dominic's company. She learned about upcoming product launches, potential partnerships, and most importantly, the company's true financial position. The information confirmed what she already suspected. Dominic was rapidly expanding the business using investor funds while keeping majority control for himself through cleverly structured stock options. Meanwhile, her personal relationship with Dominic progressed just as it had before. Romantic dinners, weekend getaways, passionate nights that left her confused and angry with herself. Despite knowing exactly what kind of man he was, Imogen found herself responding to his touch, his words, the intense focus he directed at her when they were alone. "You are different from anyone I have ever met," he told her one night as they lay in her bed, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "I feel like I can be myself with you." The irony of his statement made her want to laugh or perhaps cry. She turned away, ostensibly to check her phone, but really to hide the conflict in her eyes. How could her body still want someone her mind despised? "Is everything okay?" he asked, reaching for her. "Just a message from work," she lied, composing her features before turning back to him. Nothing that cannot wait until morning. Each time she felt herself softening toward him, Imogen forced herself to review the evidence of his duplicity. She maintained a detailed record of his interactions with Eliza Chamberlain, documented through photographs taken by a private investigator and digital communications, accessed through methods that skirted the edge of legality. The evidence painted a clear picture. While dating Imogen, Dominic was pursuing Eliza with equal fervor. They met at least twice a week, often at a small apartment he kept across town, one he had never mentioned to Imogen. Their text exchanges were filled with intimate references and plans for the future, a future that evidently did not include Imogen despite his professions of devotion to her. One afternoon, Imogen met her new friend Vera for lunch. Vera worked in public relations and had no connection to Dominic or his world, making her one of the few people Imogen could relax around. "You seem tense today," Vera observed as they sat at their favorite cafe, Trouble in Paradise. Imogen sighed, stirring her coffee. "Relationships are complicated, especially when you are dating someone like Dominic Valenti," Vera replied with a knowing look. "Rich, successful, gorgeous, and from what I hear, quite the player." "What do you mean?" Imogen asked, instantly alert. Vera leaned forward. "Just industry gossip. He has a reputation for charming powerful women, using their connections and then moving on." "Nothing confirmed, just whispers." Imogen nodded slowly. "I appreciate the warning. I will be careful." "Just watch yourself," Vera said, reaching across to squeeze her hand. "Men like that are experts at making you believe you are the only one, right up until you are not." The conversation strengthened Imogen's resolve. She was not imagining things, not overreacting because of her past experience. Dominic's pattern was real and recognized by others. That evening, she used one of her shell companies to purchase another substantial block of Valenti Tech shares that had become available when a minor investor decided to cash out. The purchase brought her combined ownership to nearly 30% of the company, still not enough for control but a significant stake that Dominic remained unaware of. Her careful plans hit an unexpected obstacle a week later. She had arranged to meet Miranda, one of Dominic's previous victims, at a quiet restaurant on the outskirts of the city. They were deep in conversation when Imogen glanced up to see Dominic entering the restaurant with a business associate. Their eyes met across the room, and she watched as confusion, then suspicion, then carefully controlled anger crossed his face. He excused himself from his companion and made his way to their table. "Imogen, what a surprise," he said, his voice pleasant but his eyes cold. "I did not realize you knew Miranda." "We just met recently," Imogen replied smoothly. "We discovered we have mutual interests in the tech investment space." Miranda, to her credit, maintained her composure. "Dominic, it has been a while." "Yes, it has," he said, his tone clipped. "Almost 3 years, I believe, since that unfortunate business misunderstanding." The tension was palpable. Imogen could see that Dominic was calculating, reassessing her in light of this new information. She needed to diffuse the situation quickly. "Dominic, Miranda has been giving me some excellent advice on diversifying my investment portfolio," she said, smiling up at him. "You know how seriously I take my financial future." His posture relaxed slightly, but the suspicion remained in his eyes. "Of course. Always the savvy businesswoman. That is one of the things I admire about you." He made polite small talk for another minute before returning to his own table, but Imogen knew the damage was done. Dominic would be watching her more closely now, questioning her motives, perhaps even investigating her background more thoroughly. "That could be a problem," Miranda murmured after he left. "Or an opportunity," Imogen replied, her mind already working on how to turn this setback to her advantage. "He thinks he caught me doing research on him. Now I just need to convince him that my interest is purely personal, that I am falling for him just as deeply as he planned." She met his suspicious gaze across the restaurant and raised her wine glass in a subtle toast. The game had become more dangerous, but also more thrilling. Dominic thought he was the hunter, never suspecting that he was actually the prey. In the weeks following the restaurant encounter, Imogen worked tirelessly to allay Dominic's suspicions. She became more affectionate, more available, letting him believe she was falling deeper under his spell. She made a show of introducing him to her wealthy friends, opening doors to new investors for Valente Tech. Most importantly, she appeared to trust him completely, sharing details about her own investments and family connections that made her seem vulnerable. "I have never felt this way about anyone before," she told him one evening as they watched the sunset from her penthouse balcony, echoing the words she had spoken in her previous life. "You make me feel safe." The calculation in his eyes was briefly replaced by something like guilt, before his practiced smile returned. "I feel the same way," he replied, kissing her gently. "You are the most important person in my life." The lie slid off his tongue so easily that had she not known better, she might have believed him. But that same morning, her private investigator had sent photos of Dominic and Eliza entering his secret apartment, emerging 2 hours later looking disheveled and intimate. 6 months into their relationship, exactly as in her previous life, Dominic took her to the rooftop restaurant where they had shared their third date. The city sparkled below them, champagne chilled in a silver bucket beside their table, and a small velvet box burned a hole in his pocket. Imogen knew what was coming and steeled herself for the performance of her life. "Imogen," Dominic began, taking her hand across the table. "These past months have been the happiest of my life. You understand me like no one else ever has. You support my ambitions, believe in my vision." He paused, pulling the small box from his pocket and opening it to reveal a stunning diamond ring. "Will you marry me?" Imogen allowed tears to fill her eyes, genuine emotions surfacing despite her controlled facade. In another life, she had been truly happy in this moment, believing every word he said. Now she knew it was all part of his scheme, a calculated move to secure her family's final investment before discarding her. "Yes," she whispered, extending her trembling hand. "Yes, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, exactly the same design as before, and kissed her passionately. Around them, other diners applauded, unaware they were witnessing a scene from a carefully choreographed deception, only not the one they imagined. The next day, Imogen set the final phase of her financial plan in motion. Through her 3 shell companies, she orchestrated a complex series of stock purchases and option exercises that would eventually give her controlling interest in Valente Tech. The transactions were staggered and routed through various financial institutions to avoid raising alarms. "Congratulations," her attorney said when the last document was signed. "You now own or control 49% of Valente Tech. Once this last transaction clears next week, you will have 51%. Imogen nodded, satisfaction coursing through her. "And there is no way to trace the ownership back to me personally?" "None," the attorney confirmed. "The ownership structure is airtight. Until you choose to reveal yourself, no one will know." With her financial control nearly secured, Imogen turned her attention to planning their engagement party. She chose the same venue as in her previous life, the elegant Wisteria Ballroom at the Grand Hotel. She selected identical flowers, music, even menu items. The déjà vu was overwhelming as she watched the preparations unfold exactly as before. 2 weeks before the party, Imogen met Vera for drinks at their favorite wine bar. Her friend studied her face with concern. "You should be glowing with happiness," Vera observed. "Instead, you look like someone planning a military campaign." Imogen managed a small smile. "Wedding planning is stressful." "It is more than that," Vera pressed. "Ever since you got engaged, you have been different. More distant, more driven. This should be the happiest time of your life, but you seem so focused on some goal that I cannot see." Imogen sighed, deciding to share a partial truth. "I learned some things about Dominic that concerned me. I have been doing some research, protecting my interests." Vera's expression grew serious. "What kind of things?" "Just business matters," Imogen deflected. "Nothing I cannot handle." "Be careful, Imogen," Vera warned. "Revenge might seem satisfying in theory, but it rarely brings the healing you expect. Whatever he did or might do, do not lose yourself in trying to even the score." The words hit closer to home than Vera could know. Was that what she was doing? Losing herself in an elaborate revenge fantasy rather than simply moving on with her life? For a moment, doubt crept in, threatening the foundation of her carefully constructed plan. Her moment of uncertainty proved prophetic. 3 days later, Dominic appeared at her apartment unannounced, his face a mask of barely controlled anger. "We need to talk," he said, brushing past her into the living room. In his hand was a folder that made her blood run cold. He slapped it down on the coffee table, spilling photographs across the surface. Photos of her meeting with his previous victims. Screenshots of financial records she had been researching. Notes about Eliza Chamberlain. "What is this?" he demanded. "Why have you been investigating me?" "Talking to Miranda and Janine. Looking into my past relationships." Imogen fought to keep her expression neutral even as panic fluttered in her chest. How had he discovered her research? Had someone betrayed her? "I can explain," she began, mind racing for a plausible excuse. "Explain what?" he interrupted, his voice rising. "That my fiancé has been acting like some kind of vindictive stalker. Digging through my past, talking to my ex-girlfriends. What exactly are you trying to do, Imogen?" She took a deep breath, realizing she needed to turn this confrontation to her advantage. "I heard rumors," she said, allowing her voice to tremble slightly, "about you and other women. About business deals gone bad. I was scared, Dominic. I needed to know if they were true." His expression shifted, anger giving way to calculation as he assessed this new information. "And instead of asking me directly, you conducted a secret investigation." "I was afraid of what you might say," she replied, letting tears fill her eyes. "Afraid of losing you if the rumors were true. I love you so much, I could not bear the thought of you having deceived me." Dominic stared at her for a long moment, clearly trying to determine if she was telling the truth. Finally, his posture relaxed slightly. "This is insane, Imogen. Those women, they have grudges against me because of business disagreements. Nothing more." "And Eliza Chamberlain?" Imogen asked softly, watching his reaction carefully. A flicker of something, shock or fear, crossed his face before he controlled it. "An old friend. A business contact. That is all." The lie hung between them, almost tangible in its audacity. Imogen forced herself to nod, to appear relieved. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I should have trusted you. Can you forgive me?" Dominic approached her, taking her hands in his, but she could feel the new tension in his grip. "Of course, but no more investigations, no more secrets between us. Promise me." "I promise," she said, meeting his gaze steadily even as she lied. After he left, Imogen sank onto her sofa, trembling with reaction. He had not believed her, not entirely. He would be watching her now, perhaps even having her followed. Her carefully laid plans seemed suddenly precarious. For a moment, she considered abandoning the whole scheme. She could break off the engagement, sell her shares in Valente Tech, and simply walk away. Start fresh somewhere else, unburdened by thoughts of revenge or justice. But then she remembered his cruel words in her previous life. "I never loved you, Imogen. You were just a bank account with legs." She remembered how he had laughed at her pain, how he had planned to use and discard her without a second thought. No, she had come too far to give up now. The engagement party was less than 2 weeks away. Her final stock purchase would clear in 3 days, giving her controlling interest in his company. Everything was in place for her to deliver the justice he deserved. "I am finishing this," she said aloud to her empty apartment, resolve hardening within her. "One way or another, this ends on my terms." The morning of the engagement party, Imogen received confirmation from her attorney. The final stock purchase had cleared. She now owned 51% of Valente Tech through her network of shell companies. Legally, undeniably, the company was hers to control. "Everything is in order," her attorney said, handing her a leather portfolio containing the necessary documentation. "You can reveal your ownership whenever you choose. The papers just need your signature to formalize the transfer of control." Imogen opened the portfolio, pen poised above the signature line. This was the point of no return. Once she signed, there would be no going back. A momentary hesitation made her pause. Was this truly justice, or had her quest for revenge consumed her? The memory of Dominic's betrayal hardened her resolve. She signed with a flourish, then closed the portfolio. "Send copies to the Valente Tech board members," she instructed, "but delay delivery until tomorrow morning. Tonight belongs to me." Next, she reviewed the evidence she had compiled against Dominic. Photos documenting his relationship with Eliza. Financial records showing how he had manipulated previous investors. Recordings of him admitting his strategy of targeting wealthy women, captured during a particularly indiscreet conversation with his business partner when he thought no one was listening. Imogen had everything loaded onto a secure tablet. With a single swipe, she could display the evidence on the large screens that had been installed in the ballroom for their engagement celebration video. As she dressed for the party, selecting a stunning silver gown that caught the light with every movement, Imogen felt strangely calm. 5 years of planning had led to this moment. Soon Dominic would face the consequences of his actions, not just with her, but with all the women he had deceived and discarded. The wisteria ballroom glittered with light and flowers when Imogen arrived. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over elegant table settings and elaborate floral arrangements. A string quartet played softly in the corner. It was exactly as she had envisioned it in her previous life, before everything had fallen apart. Guests began to arrive, filling the space with laughter and conversation. Imogen greeted them warmly, playing the role of blissful bride-to-be. Dominic remained by her side, charming and attentive, giving no indication that anything was amiss between them. Her family arrived, her mother embracing her warmly while her father shook Dominic's hand with reserved politeness. They had been more cautious about this engagement than in her previous life, sensing something in Imogen's behavior that gave them pause despite her assurances that she was deliriously happy. To her surprise, Dominic's parents were also in attendance. In her previous life, they had been notably absent from the engagement celebration, offering vague excuses about prior commitments. Their presence now was an unexpected variable, but not one that would derail her plans. Most satisfying was the arrival of special guests Imogen had invited without Dominic's knowledge. Miranda and Janine, his previous victims, entered discreetly, positioning themselves near the back of the room. Eliza Chamberlain had also received an invitation, though Imogen was unsure if she would actually appear. The question was answered when Eliza swept into the ballroom, resplendent in a red dress that immediately drew all eyes. Dominic froze mid-sentence when he saw her, his face draining of color. Imogen felt his hand tighten painfully around hers. "What is she doing here?" he hissed, his charming facade cracking. "I invited her," Imogen replied calmly. "She is an important business contact, is not she? Just an old friend, you said." Before he could respond, the event coordinator announced that dinner would be served shortly, asking guests to find their assigned tables. Dominic was forced to plaster on a smile and continue greeting guests, even as his eyes tracked Eliza's movement through the crowd. When everyone was seated and the first course served, Imogen rose to give the traditional toast. Glasses were filled with champagne, and the room quieted in anticipation. Dominic watched her with a mixture of suspicion and confusion as she stepped up to the microphone. "Thank you all for coming tonight to celebrate our engagement," Imogen began, her voice steady and clear. "It means so much to have family and friends here to witness this special moment." She paused, looking around the room, meeting the eyes of her parents, of Vera, of Miranda and Janine, and finally of Eliza, who stared back with cool assessment. "When I met Dominic Valenti, I thought I had found my soulmate," Imogen continued. "He was charming, ambitious, and seemed to understand me in a way no one else ever had." Dominic relaxed slightly, assuming this was the standard lovesick fiancé speech. He raised his glass, preparing to drink to her toast. "What I actually found," Imogen said, her tone shifting, "was a man leading a double life. A man who viewed me not as a partner, but as a funding source for his ambitions." A shocked murmur ran through the crowd. Dominic froze, his champagne glass halfway to his lips. "I discovered that while courting me, Dominic was also engaged in a relationship with someone else." Imogen gestured toward Eliza, whose expression remained impassive. "A relationship that predated ours and continued throughout our time together." Dominic stood abruptly. "Imogen, this is inappropriate. You are embarrassing yourself." "Am I?" she asked, tapping her tablet. The screens around the ballroom lit up with images. Dominic and Eliza entering his secret apartment. Text messages between them discussing their future together. Financial records showing the diversion of funds. "What you are seeing is evidence of a pattern," Imogen continued as gasps and whispers filled the room. "Dominic Valenti has made a career of targeting successful women, using their money and connections to build his business, then discarding them when they are no longer useful." Dominic strode toward her, face contorted with rage. "This is slander. I will sue you for every penny you have." "I do not think so," Imogen replied calmly, pulling the leather portfolio from beneath the podium. "Because as of this morning, I own 51% of Valenti Tech." The room went completely silent. Dominic stared at her in disbelief. "That is impossible," he whispered. Is it? Imogen opened the portfolio, displaying the documentation. For the past year, I have been systematically purchasing shares through shell companies. Meridian Ventures, Blackstone Capital, Azure Investments. All me, Dominic. Your company is now mine. His face drained of all color as he finally understood the extent of her deception. Around them, guests watched in stunned silence as the drama unfolded. Why? He managed to ask. How could you do this? Imogen faced him squarely, all pretense gone. Because you taught me that love can be faked, trust can be manipulated, and the most dangerous predator is the one wearing the most charming smile. She turned back to the shocked guests. I apologize for the unusual entertainment this evening. Please enjoy the rest of your meal. I have an appointment with the Valenti Tech Board of Directors tomorrow morning that requires my attention. With that, Imogen removed her engagement ring and placed it on the podium. She gathered her things and walked calmly toward the exit, pausing only briefly beside Eliza. He is all yours, she said quietly. Though I am not sure he is much of a prize anymore. As she left the ballroom, she heard the chaos erupting behind her. Accusations, denials, the sound of Dominic's business associates demanding explanations, but Imogen did not look back. Her focus was already on the future, one she would shape on her own terms. 1 year later, Imogen stood at the podium of the Women in Technology Annual Gala, accepting an award for entrepreneurial excellence. Under her leadership, Valenti Tech had been transformed, its mission redirected toward developing payment solutions for female-owned small businesses in underserved communities. This award belongs to all the women who refuse to be defined by their setbacks, she told the audience, who find the strength to reclaim their power and rewrite their stories. After the ceremony, as she mingled with guests at the reception, a tall man with kind eyes approached her. Congratulations on your award, he said, extending his hand. Your work with Valenti Tech has been revolutionary. Thank you, Imogen replied, shaking his hand. I believe technology should empower everyone, not just those who already hold power. I cannot agree more, he said with a warm smile. I am Daniel Mercer. I run a nonprofit focused on financial literacy for women. Perhaps there might be ways our organizations could collaborate. For the first time in years, Imogen felt a genuine spark of interest. Not the calculated attraction she had pretended to feel with Dominic, but something real and unexpected. I would like that, she said, returning his smile. As they talked, Imogen reflected on how much had changed in a year. The scandal surrounding Dominic had faded from the headlines. He had lost his company, his reputation, and most of his fortune in the fallout. Last she had heard, even Eliza had eventually left him, unwilling to attach herself to a sinking ship. But Imogen's focus was no longer on the past. She had created a foundation to help victims of financial fraud, using her experience and resources to ensure others would not suffer as she had. She had rebuilt Valenti Tech with ethical leadership and a mission she believed in. Most importantly, she had reclaimed her own story. The betrayal that had once defined her now served only as a chapter in a much larger narrative, one where she was both author and protagonist. As she listened to Daniel describe his passion for education and empowerment, Imogen felt the last pieces of her old life fall away, replaced by the promise of something new and untainted by the past. She was no longer defined by what had been done to her, but by what she had chosen to do in response. And that, she realized, was the most satisfying revenge of all.